Hello, everyone. I'm Daz, and welcome to American Civil War and UK History podcast. This presentation is available as a video on our YouTube channel or as a podcast from wherever you get your podcast from. And if you're watching on YouTube, remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a big thumbs up. And to keep up to date with everything American Civil War and UK history, check out our website where you will find blog posts and links to all of our podcasts, social media pages. The link is available in the podcast description. And joining me today is historian Mark Wheatcroft of Mark's English History channel to discuss the Battle of Waterloo. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Darren. Hi, everyone.
And so, Mark, we left the last episode after the culmination of actions of the 16th of June. Can you explain what happened after these two actions, please?
Yes, you've had two battles fought simultaneously against by Napoleon against the two Allied armies. So you've got the Allied army under the Duke of Wellington, and that is the armies of Britain and some German states, and also the army of the Royal Netherlands Army under the Prince of Orange. However, they're both under Arthur Wellesley. Duke of Wellington is the supreme commander of both of those armies. And they fight at the Battle of Quatre Bras, and the Prussian army under Gerhard von Blucher at the Battle of Ligny. And the Prussians have suffered quite a heavy defeat, but they're still in the field and they are retreating in the direction of a town called Wavre. Meanwhile, across on the other battle, they're approximately about 10 miles apart, something like that. Wellington's combined army is retreating back towards Brussels, and they're going to stop and camp on a ridge outside, about 10 miles outside of Brussels. The nearest place to it is a farmhouse called Mont Saint-Jean, and about 3 miles to the north of that is a village named Waterloo, and it's there that Wellington is going to set up his headquarters and spend the night. But most of the army is going to spend it in the open fields along this ridgeline. And this ridgeline is somewhere that Wellington had seen approximately a year before, and had decided that and commented at the time that if he ever needed to fight a battle on the outskirts of Brussels, this is where it would be, and that he's kept it in his pocket since then. And so Wellington has halted his army and now waiting. Now he is waiting. He's halted his army there. It's not confirmed at this moment in time as to whether or not he's going to fight the battle. He's waiting to hear from the Prussian headquarters as to whether they're in a position to come to his aid. Blucher, if you've seen the video previously, had been injured or has been shot from his horse in the battle. The horse had been killed. He'd been on it. The horse, as it went over, trapped him. And so his second in command, Eisenhower, had taken the army into retreat. However, he had followed Blucher's orders to retreat towards Wavre, so staying in contact and parallel with Wellington's army. And so when Blucher is found and brought to the headquarters, he sends word to Wellington that his army is still intact and it's in a position to come to his aid. And so that gives Wellington the go-ahead to fight the battle.
Okay. How close were the Allies from breaking contact at this point?
It's hard to say, but despite Eisenhower's distrust of the British, he never broke contact. So I don't think it was that they were ever that far off of breaking contact. If potentially Napoleon could have brought the Erlon's Corps in or Ney's troops across to push them away, then potentially. But I think the way things unfolded, it enabled them to retreat. And if there was ever a moment when it was likely that they'd break contact, it was that time when Blucher was absent, because Gneisenhower may have put him in motion to a different place, but he kept with Blucher's wishes.
Okay. So how does Napoleon follow up after these two battles?
So Napoleon does, he first of all, he sends Marshal Grouchy with approximately a third of his army away after the Prussians on their retreat, expecting them, first of all, to be heading back towards Prussia across the border, with the aim of engaging, and holding them. If nothing else, if you can't force them away and you can't get in between the Prussians and the British, to at least engage them in a holding action, similar to what happened over at Quatre Bras, where it was trying to put, one of the reasons why it was fought there was trying to prevent the British from going to the Prussians' assistance, as well as to capture the crossroads and to come down. So if it was to try and find them, engage them, and stop them coming to the Allied assistance. After setting Grouchy's forces in motion, Napoleon takes the rest of his army across to Quatre Bras, because by this point the Anglo-British British Allied army had retreated off the crossroads, and they now held them. So the road from Saint-Fefay to Quatre Bras is open for Napoleon. So he marches his troops down there, joins Ney, and then they move up the Valois, the Russell-Charleroi road north in pursuit of Wellington.
Okay. So talk us through the weather on the night of the 16th, because this will play a major role and impact the day of the battle, won't it?
Yeah, so the moment the battle almost stops, in fact, it could even been one of the reasons why the battle sort of grind to a halt. The heavens absolutely open and it tips down. And it rains almost incessantly. It rains pretty much throughout the whole of the 17th as well. So, but you probably wouldn't have seen much action on the 17th, because both armies had fought significantly during the 16th. So it would have taken time to reorganize and get everyone in position, especially for the French army, because they've got to come from one battlefield to the other battlefield and then to move up. So, um, generally speaking, don't know exactly where Napoleon spent the night of the 16th. I know he spent the night of the 17th at a property called Le Calot, which is uh, about, I think it's about 4 kilometers south of I don't think it's south of the Belle Alliance, but it's definitely like it's a fair old way from the French line at Waterloo. But I don't know where he spent the night of the 16th. Um, but yeah, there's heavy rain that evening, and it well into the 17th. And if you've ever been to Waterloo after it's rained, so when I was out there the other week, it had been there'd been quite a bit of rain, and you got that level of surface mud. And probably if you're uninitiated with Waterloo, and obviously we don't get pictures, things like that. If you think like we're not that far from Ypres, where the big battles of the First World War were fought, where you've got those, especially the battles of 1917, all those pictures of Chateau Wood, where you've got the troops coming back through, and it's a complete morass. So again, it's that level of small level of topsoil with a clay level underneath. The water, the fields here get very, very flooded and very soft very easy. And so for an army of this period, that is not something you want to be fighting on, because the cannonballs are just going to stick, they're not going to bounce. Cavalry is going to get bogged down and slowed up. Men are going to find it hard to march. You're dealing with rudimentary road systems as well at this time. So at best, you've got what we call pave, which is large cobblestones. So if you're into your cycling, those sort of Tour de Flanders, Paris-Roubaix, those kind of races, that's the kind of road conditions that that these armies are going to be moving along. They're not nice tarmac roads like we've got today, and that's the best of the road conditions. Otherwise, it's dirt farm tracks, things like that. So these are all elements that's going to build into this battle.
Hmm. And so that really slows the French down then.
Significantly slows the French down. Wellington's not bothered because what Wellington is trying to buy time. So
Hmm.
the French taking their time to start the
So
battle.
that's a little bit of luck on the Allies' point of view. Really, is that the rain does come then in a way, gives them a chance to regroup a little bit, doesn't it? I suppose.
It it does, but then it affects both armies simultaneously. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of Wellington is buying time,
Hmm.
the fact that Napoleon is delaying, Wellington doesn't provoke Napoleon into starting the battle
Hmm.
because he's he knows that the more he waits, the more to his advantage it will become.
Yeah. One thing I definitely want to ask, I forgot to ask in the previous podcast, was what kind of casualties were there for the French? Did they lose a lot of guys in these two battles that they fought?
I don't I don't know the exact casualty rates, but battles at these times are pretty horrific
Hmm.
in terms of their casualty rate because when you're standing less than 100 yards apart, blasting lead into each other,
Yeah.
and these are lead balls. So I've got some examples here. These are actual balls that have been found from the battlefield.
Okay.
And so you can see the size of them there. They're not small musket balls. And so when these musket balls hit, that they do significant damage. You know, like a modern day bullet, if it clips your bone, it you're gonna get a little chip off your bone. These balls, they're gonna obliterate it. There's gonna be nothing there for quite a large segment, which is why amputations are the only way to deal with them. If you're hit anywhere in the torso area, that's it. You are dead
Hmm.
at this stage. So, yeah, although I don't know the exact numbers, it's going to be for both armies. It's going to be quite a high percentage.
Okay. But of course, the French can't afford to lose as many as the Allies, can they, at this point?
No, because although, as we'll come on to later on, the events unfold, it doesn't get to this point, but there's still two more armies out in the distance to the east
Hmm.
to come against Napoleon. So if if they do get eventually the numbers will tell. The French actually out of the three armies that are in the field, the French have actually got the best medical care. They actually have a proper ambulance corps and a proper medical corps attached to their armies. Where I don't know much about the Prussians, but I know with the British Army, it's basically if the regimental commander could afford to employ a surgeon, then they would have one. If not, they wouldn't.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's no actual centralized medical corps or anything like that in terms of what you would get later on. That comes realistically post Crimea in the British Army, but in the French they've already got the I'd say rudimentary because obviously in today's terms it's rudimentary, but at the time it was quite a high functioning medical service in the army.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks for adding that and answering those questions. So this brings us to the famous morning of 18th of June, 1815, and of course the Battle of Waterloo. So talk us through the dispositions of both armies, please.
Yeah, so the British Army, British Allied Army, is deployed upon the ridge that will go by. We will call it the Ridge of Mont Saint Jean because Waterloo, like I say, it's approximately 3 miles to the north, and we'll come on to how the battle gets its name towards the end. But at the moment that we're along the ridge of Mont Saint Jean, now it's quite a even today it's quite a significant feature in the landscape, even though quite a bit of it has been altered in for building a certain monument there. Um, But when Wellington's position is based around three farmhouses. So you've got a position on the right called Hougoumont, and as you can see from the map there, that position is quite a long way forward. It's almost in the French lines, which the first time I visited it, it surprised me just how far forward it was. You then got the farmhouse of Les Saints, which is bang in the middle. It's on that road just before it kicks up over the ridge. And then out on the left, you've got the farmhouses of Papelotte and La Haye. So Papelotte is generally seen as being the left hand of the battlefield. La Haye is there, but it gets abandoned fairly quickly in the fighting to bolster the defense of La Haye, of Papelotte. So that's the British line, and then behind those farmhouses, it is defined ridge. And Wellington does deploys his troops in a similar fashion that he's done all the way through Peninsula, which is called the reverse slope. So the reverse slope is if you look at a ridge and you've got that defined ridge line that runs along the top, it's on the back side of it. So the enemy is unable to see you. So that comes as numerous advantages. The first and foremost, you're protecting your men. You're hiding them behind the ridge. That ridge is going to stop any cannonballs, any musket fire from hitting you. So you're not under consistent bombardment. But also what it's doing is it means that the enemy can't see your dispositions. He can't see what areas you've got of strength, what areas you've got maybe of weakness, and assault certain areas and not maybe other areas. Now, the actual battlefield itself is quite a defined valley. There's a lot of intermediate ridges as well. Maps and pictures don't really do it justice. It's one of those battlefields you kind of want to actually go and walk to understand sort of just how many bits of dead ground and things like that. But at the opposite side of the valley, there's another ridge line running parallel to the Mont Saint-Jean ridge. It's not as high. And if you walk straight from La Haye-Saint along, there's a tavern on the left hand side, and that tavern's called La Belle Alliance. And so this is the ridge line roughly where the French are going to initially deploy. And what Napoleon does is he always puts his troops on the front of that ridge, because what he sees it, rather than hiding them so the enemy don't know, psychological. Put them in front, let them see what you've got, because this is what's won in battle after battle after battle for Europe. Because when he's fought these armies of Austria, Russia, certain Prussian and other German states, generally speaking, they were conscript armies, and so they're not professionals like the Brits are. And when a lot of their victories are won by pure psychological. You put all these numbers there. You put all he has what he calls his grand batteries. So all these guns line wheel to wheel to wheel, spread out, that can put a massive bombardment into one location. Whereas if you look at the British artillery dispositions, you have a regiment, then you have some guns, then you have a regiment, then you have some guns. And so they're a bit more spaced out and not so concentrated. And this is all Napoleon's psychological warfare. And so that's the makeup of the armies. Now, in terms of the Prussians, they're at a place called Wavre, which is out to the east, and that's where they are. And Grouchy is around there somewhere, but Grouchy just kind of gets lost. He doesn't. He eventually finds the Prussians, but by then it's a bit too late. And then on the right hand side of Napoleon's line is the village of Plassanois, and we'll come on to that village later on. But the French haven't got the anchors like the Anglo-Allied army has in terms of the farmhouses, because Wellington's army is going to fight a defensive battle, and Napoleon's going to fight an offensive battle, and so Napoleon doesn't need to have anchor points in the line, because these points are designed to stop flanking movements, etc.
And again, this is all on Napoleon to attack the Allies, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, because Blue, as we said in the last, if you watch the last video, Blucher was promised to come to Wellington's aid,
Hmm.
and so Napoleon needs a quick victory. Time is not on his side. He needs to strike and strike and get this done before the Prussians can reinforce Wellington's position.
Yeah. Okay. So at this point, when the battle starts at 11:20 a.m., it's just the British and the French at this point, and the Dutch.
Yeah, like it's Britain, it's British, it's German, it's Dutch,
Okay. Yeah.
because bearing in mind that at this point in time, for example, we've still got those German units. Britain was ruled by the King George III, King of England, and then he his son, the Prince of Wales. This is the Regency period, was ruling because the king was mad. Um, they are the electors of Hanover, so
Hmm.
they're actually of German descent. That they are German themselves. So we've got Hanoverian troops, we've got the King's German Legion, we've got the Brunswickers there, we've got the Dutch army there. It's all under Wellington's command. He eventually wins the War of Words with the Prince of Orange, who tried to take command because he was the heir to the Kingdom of Netherlands throne and it's in their country, but they kind of said, look, he knows what he's doing, you don't. So they're under Wellington's command, but it is a multinational army because a lot of those are fighting. So when we say British, we're talking Highlanders, we're talking a third of it's Irish, for example.
Yeah.
Um, because they generally recruited from the poor in terms of the British Army, they're recruiting from the poorer areas of the British Isles and also the Empire. There's black soldiers fighting, for example,
Hmm.
at Waterloo. So there is a lot. It's not just a British army. It is a very much this part is very much multinational before the Prussians even arrive.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks for adding that. Um, yeah, I didn't really think of it like that, but yeah, it was the British Empire was huge at the time, wasn't it? So they would have definitely been involved.
Yeah,
Um,
like you didn't have Empire regiments that you would get in the First World War in terms of
Mhm.
Australian or Canadian regiments, but you would have had people from those areas that had somehow come into the army.
Mhm. Okay. So I know we've mentioned the weather on the 16th into the 17th. And you said it rains pretty much all the day on the 17th, but that will play a part in delaying the start of the battle, won't it? So Napoleon makes his opening move. Can you describe that for us, please?
Yeah, so his opening move is to send Relais Corps against Hougoumont. So part of that, one of the divisional commanders is his younger brother Jerome. And this, in effect, is a movement. It's to send a relatively large force down against this fortified position to try and draw troops away from other positions on the battlefield in support so that he can then launch a major attack. So the initial bombardment, initial focus falls upon the chateau or fortified farmhouse of Hougoumont. And Hougoumont is made up. There's the chateau courtyard area. There's a walled garden. There's an orchard, and there's a forest area. So if you look on the map that you've got there, um, the the grey block looks to me as if that's incorporating the walled garden. So that's the farmhouse courtyard area and the walled garden itself. The the orchard would extend from the right corner eastern wall heading towards Les and Shower Brussels Road, and then the forest will come out where you've got the red line that comes out south of Hougoumont itself towards where the Really Corps is advancing. You had Dutch Jaegers, the Dutch riflemen, skirmishers in that forest, so they were defending it first, and then they got to the actual the farmhouse where it was defended by a mixture of Dutch Jaegers and British Guards. That Guards regiment is the precursor to what we call the Guards, the Coldstream Guards regiment today. And that's under the command of Colonel MacDonald, and he has been his task is hold it at all costs. We're going to come on more to the Battle of Hougoumont a bit later, but in the opening phases, the Dutch Jaegers get cleared from the forest. They're skirmishers, so once the weight and numbers come through, they get pushed clear, and then you get the Battle of the South Wall come up. Now, the recent excavations by Waterloo uncovered has suggested that this area around the South Wall is one of the largest killing grounds in the actual battle itself. With significant French casualties taking place there. And what's going to happen over the course of the day is more and more troops are going to get sucked into this battle. So the battle for Hougoumont becomes a battle within the larger battle, which it never was. It was always just going to be. It was always meant to be just a diversionary assault for the French before another attack is launched.
Mhm. And so, about 1:30, Napoleon makes his first big move against the Anglo-Allied line. So, can you describe what happens, please?
Yeah, so this is on Napoleon's right or the British left, so east of the Charleroi Brussels Road, and it's going to involve the Erlon's Corps. So this is a large formation, is going to advance against the left hand of Wellington's line, and it advances down. They advance in column of battalions, so the battalion width, and then there's 4 battalions stacked up one behind the other. So um, it's a significant formation that's moving against this part of the line. And as it advances down the valley, they also bring up their artillery as well. So they move from that ridge line just to the north of the Belle Alliance to one of these more intermediate ridges and set up their gun line there. So they're able to put cannon fire onto the position. Now, I discussed a moment ago about how Wellington always put his troops behind the ridge line to protect them. There's one brigade that's ahead of that line, and that's brigade that's stationed ahead of in front of the ridge, and they were one of the first brigades to arrive at Quatre Bras, so they've been severely mauled on the 16th as well, and they're seen to be breaking in front of this large assault. So Wellington orders Picton to take it at 5th Division. Again, another division has been severely mauled at Quatre Bras the day before, down over the ridgeline to engage with the Erlon's Corps. Picton leads them down in the midst of the fight advancing. He's actually struck in the forehead whilst riding his horse, comes off, and is killed instantly, and he becomes the highest commanding officer in the British Army to be killed at the Battle of Waterloo. His division moves down. It has some success in checking this advance, but they are significantly outnumbered, and they are in severe trouble. At this point, Wellington turns to Lord Uxbridge, his cavalry commander, and orders him to send in his heavy brigade, one of his heavy cavalry brigades, the Union Brigade. The Union Brigade is because it's made up of troops of cavalry regiments from English, Scottish, and Irish regiments. The most famous of them being the Scots Greys. So big, large, white, grey horses, red coated, bearskins, Actually, the picture that I've got behind me is the Scots Greys charge, and so this cavalry brigade sweep over the hill and sweep and crash into the Erlon's division. The Scots Greys have remarkable success. In fact, one of their sergeants, Sergeant Ewart, who's now buried out in the car park area of Edinburgh Castle, captures one of the French Eagles, their standards, and brings it back to Wellington. However, unfortunately, what happens with regard to the Scots Greys is that they get over ambitious, and so they see the French gun line and they charge up this gun line to assault it. But the ground is very, very heavy. As we've said, it's a very, very muddy battlefield. And once they get up to the gun line, they do some damage to the gunners, but Napoleon orders a counter assault by French lancers. And being like cavalry, these horses are a lot smaller, a lot faster, more agile. The the Scots Greys horses by this point are blown, and so when the counter charge takes place, the Scots Greys just can't get out of there in time, and one of they suffer horrific casualties, including the commanding officer, Sir William Ponsonby, is killed out on the battlefield. There is another countercharge by British light cavalry in an attempt to so several dragoon regiments countercharge from just behind the Papillotte farm across. If you walk from Papillotte back up the ridge towards the crossroads, you'll see a slight lessening of the gradient, and that's the position from which this light cavalry assault went in. And this was an attempted rescue mission. So engage the light cavalry to allow the rest of the heavies to get back, which they did success, which is kind of a successful counter charge, because some of them were able to get back, and then but by this point, the Erlon's assault it has been completely worn out by this point.
About this time, movement is thin off to the east, but who are they?
Yeah, so you often hear about movement being seen. When I was at the battlefield, there is a ridgeline that obscures it. So what point in time people start seeing these troop movements is debatable, but certainly at some point in the mid-afternoon, troop movements are started to be seen on the horizon lines as they start moving across. Now, because we're looking at a distance of several miles, it's hard to tell though that is it Prussian black, is it French blue, is it Prussian navy blue? It's very hard to say. However, Napoleon spreads the order around that it is Grouchy. Whether or not he believes it, whether or not he knows it's the Prussians and he's just saying it to sort of to speed up the army. But yeah, over in that area, troop movements start now to be seen. But at this point in time, no one knows actually who it is.
Excellent, thanks for that. And across the other side of the battlefield, the fight for Hougoumont is reaching crisis point. Talk us through the fight, if you will.
Yeah, so we've already discussed how how you get the fight for the South Gate. So the picture you've got there, that's the fight along the South Wall and for the South Gate. Now, you follow the South Wall round, you've got the East Wall, and you've got the Orchard. Now, if you go round to that area, that's directly under the ridge line. So although you do get fighting spilling around that side, it's under artillery assault, under artillery fire from the ridgeline from that. So the majority of the overspill from the South Wall starts to go around the West Wall. Now, the West Wall it's not actually a West Wall, it's a West Block. It's the main stable block and a few of the other blocks along there. So there's no way in, like there's a little doorway through, but that's fully barricaded, etc. But then as you turn round the North Wall, you then get to the North Gate. And it's here that the action reaches that crisis point, because eventually the amount of numbers swelling around there starts to build for the French, more so than the numbers there are just too big for the fire that's coming off of the North Wall by the guardsmen on it to have an effect to diminish that number. Eventually, one of a pioneer from the French army is able to get to the gate and hack at the doors until the hack at the gates until they break, at which point a large number of French soldiers manage to pour in. Now, the gates, they're only open for a limited period of time. You're probably looking at maximum of a few minutes. These gates are then led by a officer and a sergeant. They're pushed shut and they are barred, and the all the Frenchmen within inside the grounds are then set upon by the guardsmen, and all of them except a single drummer boy are killed. But Wellington would later say that victory at the Battle of Waterloo depended upon the closing of the gates of Hougoumont.
Okay, yeah. So, and again, because like you said, obviously you've been there, it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's gonna, it's really horrible fighting there, wasn't it?
Yeah, and if it had fallen, then that right flank could then be assaulted. It could be like it would be a launching pad for an assault up the right flank and to roll the right flank up.
Okay, so again, is Wellington just throwing troops into this then, into the melee for this?
There is some, obviously you've got resupply going on all the time. But no, like at this point in time, it's more of a siege going on. That sort of there's so many French troops around it that it's hard to put any more troops in.
Hmm.
Just because they've almost sealed it off. So if they can get resupply, um, ammunition supplies down there, they can that they're trying to. They've got a limited area that they're able to put fire onto. But once there's fighting both around the north and the south gate, that's it. They can't get anything else in. No one can get in. No one can get out.
Hmm.
So it is at that point, every man for themselves. Just defend it, defend it, defend it. Don't let the French in.
Okay. Let's move on to the next topic, which is Napoleon is going to become ill at this point and hands over the command to Marshal Ney. Um, can you describe what happens next, please?
Yeah, so there's various different reasons put forward as to why Napoleon falls ill. It's most historians believe it was some form of stomach issue. Whether or not it was the stomach cancer that he would die from in the early stages is open for debate, but he's definitely he leaves the field and hands over command to Marshal Ney. Now, precisely why he then orders the cavalry charges again is open for debate. A lot of scholars and a lot of the history suggest that he can see large numbers of men retiring from to the rear. The farmhouse in Mont Saint Jean that's just off the back of the ridge is the main hospital for the British forces. Uh, so it's often stated that what he actually sees is those troops heading towards the hospital, and he feels that it's Wellington in retreat and that the whole army's moving off, and that's why he launches the counter assault. However, again, standing at sort of that Belle Alliance position or around that and looking up at the ridges, even on today's ridge, which has been significantly modified, you cannot see that. You can't see that road heading down towards Mont Saint Jean. So but I feel that's open to debate myself. I'm not 100% certain that he certainly could not see that. Now, whether or not he felt he could see it, whether or not I don't know. But he launches these mass cavalry charges against the British and Allied forces, and they're gonna come up and they're gonna swerve through. So they're gonna be on western part of the battlefield. So from Ney's position to, and he's going to lead them personally, to the left of the Charleroi-Brussels road, and they're going to swing in between Hougoumont and La Sainte and come up onto that onto Wellington's centre right position.
Hmm. How much this is affected to the troops? I know that the Napoleon has gone off the or been taken off ill.
Obviously, the troops that are in and around that position that Napoleon was would know. But I think like if you're looking at the Erlon's Corps that are still fighting down in that valley area, um, no, they wouldn't know.
Okay, so that
Um,
doesn't affect the way the French army is fighting this battle.
no, no, it wouldn't. Not in terms of some sort of morale effect. What obviously what it does affect is what is actually going on, and so when these cavalry charges occur, Wellington sees all the cavalry starting to mass. He knows that they're about to get cavalry charge, so he orders his men to retire back further from the ridge and to form square. So it's where a regiment will wheel around on itself by companies, form a square, a rectangle, various shapes. It's basically a hollow formation with all the supernumeraries, so officer, senior regimental officers, musicians, colours, etc. in the middle. Front, all ranks will have fixed bayonets. The front ranks will be kneeling, the rear ranks will be standing, and they'll be loaded. And they'll be located in a checkerboard kind of formation so that they're not going to accidentally fire on each other. And so what happens, so Wellington can see what's going to come. He gets his troops into position. And so all it's going to do is actually just waste more time. So picture you see there, that's a picture of infantry square formation. And this is how the British Army and more armies than the British formation that's used to fight off cavalry. So you're making a hedgerow of bayonet points, and a horse will not charge that. So the front rank kneel, bay bayonets locked into right, muskets locked into the ground, bayonets pointing up. This is what I was saying about in the previous episode when we were talking about the Baker rifle having the swords. It's so that when you're in square in that front rank position, those bayonet points are going to all be at the same height. You're not going to get a dip because you've got someone with a shorter rifle in there. And then the rear rank, although they've got their bayonets fixed, they're loading and firing. And then, like I say, you're in a checkerboard formation so that you've got plenty of. You're not gonna if one square fires, it's not gonna cause casualties in another square. So what happens is during these cavalry charges, like I say, it does waste a lot of time, but it does allow the French to bring up more artillery closer to that British line. And whilst so you've got Mercer's battery, they're up on the British Royal Horse Artillery Battery, they're up on the ridge line, they're firing into the cavalry up until the last minute, and then they're breaking, running back to the squares, and then lying down in front of underneath the muskets. But during this time, because the British line has retreated further back to be able to form these various squares, it does mean that La Sainte becomes susceptible to attack, and the French capture it. Unfortunately, La Sainte falls in the sector of the battlefield that's under the command of the Prince of Orange, and this is one of the things that is laid heavily on him in terms of talking about him not being a good commander, is that he then orders Colonel von Ompted's King's German Legion to go and recapture it. Now, when you're up on that ridgeline, looking down towards La Sainte, now unfortunately, La Sainte is in private hands, and they're not welcoming at all to the visitors. So You can't get too close to the farmhouse, but there's a little track that leads down to it. If you just walk a little way down there and have a look over, you can see there's pockets of dead ground caused by these intermediary ridges. And inside inside one of these pockets of dead ground was the French heavy cavalry cuirassiers, the ones with the breastplates and the helmets, and they sweep out and they come in and they decimate the Ontidas, King's German Legion that went down as part of a reinforcement. Now Lausanne is recaptured again prior to the prior to the final assault. But Lausanne in that centre, that it falls and refalls a number of times, especially once Wellington starts to pull troops from the left flank of his position across. He gives up the left hand side of the battlefield, especially once the Prussians start arriving. And so Hougoumont and Lausanne become the anchors.
Okay. So then the French hear the news that they've been dreading, and the Prussians arrive on the battlefield. Talk us through their arrival and how this is going to affect the battle.
So when the Prussians start arriving, there's Wellington by this point is starting to give ground on that left position. He knows the Prussians are coming, and his numbers are starting to diminish now, so that he's struggling to hold the entire line. So he does start to give ground on that left position, but the Prussians are starting to come, and you're going to get two various formations coming in. So some are going to come up and come along the O'Hain Road, along the ridge line. There's another road, so there's a crossroads at the centre of Wellington's position at the start of the battle. Troops are going to come along there and start to reinforce his position. In that area, more troops are going to be sent down towards, past the Papillotte farm and into that village of Place-en-Moi, that's kind of in the right rear of the French position. And so this means that Napoleon needs to dispatch troops away from the main battlefield down into this village. And it's not that far. It's only a short distance from the Belle Alliance position. And so more and more troops are getting forced down into there to fight the Prussians. But and like I say, more of them are also coming onto the Mont Saint Jean Ridge as well to reinforce Wellington's position. And this is gonna it's now the crunch point for Napoleon, because his worst fear is coming true.
What happened to the troops under Grouchy? Where are they?
So Grouchy is fighting. Let me start again. When Blucher moves and leaves to join up with Wellington, he leaves a small contingent of his force at the town of Wavre, which is the town village that they retreat to after the Battle of Ligny. Grouchy eventually comes into contact with this force, believing it's part of the main Prussian force. He fully commits to engage it. And so this is where a breakdown of intelligence on Grouchy's part has come into play, because rather than being able to extract himself from that fight, move around it and go to Napoleon's assistance, he sits there, he just batters away all day trying to fight this force, and all they're doing is just sitting there, they're just taking it. And so he's stuck out there on this fourth battle of the campaign that's often forgotten, because obviously Waterloo's happening a few miles away. But that large chunk of Napoleon's army that he's got just isn't involved at all. It's involved with this this holding action by a relatively smaller Prussian force.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And we now reach the climactic part of the battle. Take us through it, please. And I know you mentioned Napoleon obviously being ill, but is he still involved in the battle at this point when
Yes, and
the climax? Okay.
yes, Napoleon's now, but Napoleon's back on the field. In fact, he comes back onto the field towards the end of the mass cavalry charges. Um, Now you're going to get a number of things happen. I wouldn't say simultaneously, but the fight for the village of Plassanoir now is becoming very intense and very dangerous for the French. So Napoleon now realizes that there's only one thing to do, and that is he has to break Wellington's line. If Wellington stays on that line, that bridge any longer, he cannot. He needs to. He's been fighting Wellington all day. He knows Wellington suffered significant casualties. If he can knock him out now, potentially he can then put all his effort against the Prussians in Plassanois. And so he calls on his Imperial Guard, so the Young Guard is already engaged. The Imperial Guard is Napoleon's reserve. It's his veteran corps. It's his veteran unit. So you've got the young, the middle, and the old guard. Young guard has already been sent down into Plassanois to hold the Prussians. So it's going to be the old and the middle guard now that are going to go, and he's going to call for, them and advance them towards Wellington's line in that left of centre, that Wellington's right of centre. So again, they're coming up that same area that the cavalry charges took place. So in the ground between Hougoumont and La Sainte, and they're going to push up into that area. And so the battle now begins in earnest. So they're going to come up through that area between La Sainte and Hougoumont, and Napoleon himself rides with them to begin with. So they form up in the area to the west of the Brussels-Charleroi road, directly opposite the Belle Alliance Tavern, and they move off. Now, as you look across the battlefield, there's another one of these intermediary ridges, and it's probably about that point that that Ney and a few of the marshals tell Napoleon, no, you've got to stay here, you've got to go back. You're not, do not lead them all the way, because possibly Napoleon knows the game's up, so he's doing some sort of suicidal charge. Okay, so Napoleon advances with the Imperial Guard, and when you look at the battlefield from the position that they start the advance from, you can see this one of the intermediary ridges, and it's possibly on one of these that the marshals tell Napoleon to go back, to stop, and to retire back to that Belle Alliance position. And the Imperial Guard continues. So Imperial Guard, they're Napoleon's veterans. They've never been defeated. They're the shock troops. They're the last ones to go in, and often claim the victory. But they've never before faced a force that has just anchored themselves to a ridge. And so it's a slow advance. It's a small battlefield, but when you walk across it, it still takes a long time to get across it. Obviously, they're going to be under fire for a large amount of that. They're going to go through areas that are covered by some form of fire from both Hougoumont and La Sainte, but also up on that ridge line, you've got the batteries still up there. So, for example, you've got Mercer's battery up there. They're still going to be hammering away at them as they come up. And behind that ridge line, you've got Maitland's Guards division behind there. And as they crest the ridge, Wellington calls out, "Now, Maitland, now's your time." And with that, he calls his boys, up, up, up. They'll stand up, and then they just start hitting them with volley fire after volley fire after volley fire. And like I said, for the Imperial Guard, this is something that they've not experienced before, because they've not, most of the time, these units break in front of them, where at this time there's actually just trained soldiers just up, just loading, aiming, firing, loading, aiming, firing, professionals doing their jobs. And then to the right of Maitland's division, you've got the 52nd Regiment of Foot, and their commanding officer wheels them round to the right, so they swing round, and so that their line is parallel to these columns of French infantry, and then they just start hammering fire into them as well. And it's this cumulative effect of fire from the front and from the side, just wears and wears and wears them, and the attack stalls, and then eventually they start to back off, and as they start to back off and they retreat, the rumor goes round that the French army, the guard retreats. And that is the point at which the French army, Napoleon's army, starts to deteriorate and to break, because this one regiment that is the consistence of winning battles that's never been defeated, it's been defeated now. And it's sort of all the games up, and almost simultaneously, because when you're on the battlefield and you're in these different positions, you can see you can't. It's not a dead flat battlefield. You can't look across and go, "Oh, look, the guards retreating, but we're off." In other positions, you can't see. So at the same time, down in Plassenoir, the Prussians break through. They start streaming up. The Erlon's brigade starts breaking. Well, starts breaking. So simultaneously across the battlefield, you're getting all these different areas of pockets where French resistance is breaking, and it just all comes into one mass almost at that moment. But they're almost not linked because you can't see. So you wouldn't, if you're fighting down in Plassenoir, you're not going to know what's going on over that back towards Hougoumont. You're not, or if you're in D'Erlon's corps, you're not going to be able to see across it. You can hear it, you're not going to be able to see it. But eventually, or you get a simultaneous breaking of the French army, and then Wellington's behind Maitland's division on that side of the army, and when the guard breaks, he looks across. He knows it's victory. He stands up on his stirrups. He waves his hat around a few times and points it forward, and that's the signal then for the whole line to advance. And it's around about this point in the battle that he's sitting next to Uxbridge, and when Uxbridge loses his leg, it's around that point as the advance starts that a cannon shot rings out. It hits Uxbridge in the leg, and he turns around to Wellington and says, "My God, sir, I think I've lost my leg." And Wellington looks down and says, "My God, sir, so you have."
Oh, okay. And is there any truth or in this legend?
Again, a lot of the anecdotes on it, I think that they were certainly next to each other when it happened. But whether or not those exact words were said to each other, I don't know. It's hard to say.
There is a famous story about the battle ending. Would you like to tell us how that unfolds?
Yeah, so this follows directly on from the retreat of the Imperial Guard. So once the Imperial Guard fall into retreat, as I said, you get this simultaneous mass break of all the French forces, and a lot of them try to cram along the Charleroi-Brussels road, because you moving along a road is the easiest way. And one of the people who is spirited away down this road is Napoleon. He's shoved into his carriage pretty much unceremoniously. It's just get in and you're gone. Um, but there's a lot of congestion in the area between La Belle Alliance and Le Calot, and what it's hard to exactly, again, a lot of mythology, romanticism around the battle, so it's very hard to actually pick out what really happened against what may have happened and what's been made up. But certainly the Imperial Guard is said to have formed a square, and at some point one of the British staff officers rides up to the square, addresses General Cambronne, who is the commander of the Imperial Guard, to the three guards, the young, the middle, and the old guard, and so offers a due compliments and says basically, there's been enough death today. If his men lay down their arms, he will spare their lives, of which Cambronne was supposedly to come back with two comments. One is he replied, "The guard dies, but it never surrenders." The other is that he uttered a simple singular word, "mad shit." Of which case the British forces that were close by opened up. Now, considering that very close to that position where that was supposed to have occurred, there's two monuments. So one is the Wounded Eagle Monument, which is possibly one of the best of all the monuments on the battlefield. I think it's one of the most spectacular. The other is a monument to Victor Hugo, the author. That certainly that the guard dies, it doesn't surrender, does have a very sort of author's kind of romanticism to it. But it's more than likelihood that this is we've already just described the Imperial Guard as Napoleon's elite. If any unit was going to try and could reform, put in a rear guard action to allow others to escape, and then extricate themselves from the battlefield, it's them. And so, more than likelihood is that again, it's something that's been romanticized. This was the culmination battle of over 20 years of war. It's a You don't often get battles like this, and so every element to it has been mythologized. And I think that this is another example. And the more likelihood is that you have got this slight knoll in the ground just to the south of the Belle Alliance. It's possibly a location that if anyone people were going to form a rear guard and try and hold off an enemy force until that point, then that's likely the likely location, and then possibly extricate themselves. The Imperial Guard had the skill to do that, and so that's most probably what happened.
Okay, so really and truly, it's sort of like a myth and legend, really, isn't it?
Yeah, after 200 years, there's so much been written about it that a lot of the myth becomes the fact, and
Hmm.
it that it would take a lot of research to sort of to say whether or not it was a yes or a no as to whether or not something like that did happen. And even the officers that were there, as you know yourself with Civil War work, you've got people like Chamberlain there that are able to write, and they write themselves up and make themselves. And so, was a story like this, you might look at an officer's diary and he writes it down, but did it actually happen, or are they making it up at the time just to embellish their own story? Like these things were happening all the time in history at the time. So again, it's very hard to say myth, legend.
Hmm. Okay.
Oh, just after this event occurs with the Imperial Guard, obviously Wellington's advanced his whole army down. The Prussians have come up, and at the Belle Alliance Tavern, you do the road from Place Noire comes up and meets the Brussels Charleroi Road, and that's the place where supposedly Wellington and Blucher meet. Um, it has been suggested it was a bit further south, um, but the story goes that they meet outside the tavern, and Blucher says to Wellington, "Quelle affaire, mon ami," and then mentions the name of the tavern and suggests that that could be the name of the Battle of La Belle Alliance. But obviously, it goes down in history with a different name.
Yes, and of course, the victors always choose the name, don't they?
Yes.
And okay, then, mate. So this is a horrendous battle. Um, and before we get on to how the campaign ends, and obviously we know the French have lost this battle, and what happens to Napoleon, I'd like to know about the cleanup operation afterwards because it must have been horrendous.
Yeah, it's a cleanup operation. It's very awkward. We don't know too much about what happened in the direct aftermath, to be honest. Obviously, the British Army shattered. It spends the night on the battlefield and sleeping amongst the dead and the wounded. And the people of Brussels are known to have come out and looted the bodies. taken anything of value, including teeth. So Waterloo teeth, false teeth for years afterwards were known as Waterloo teeth because that's where predominantly the teeth had come from. And there are some paint, so there's been some archaeological work done on the battlefield by the Waterloo Uncovered charity. They found a body recently. I think that was out towards Plus and Y, if memory serves me correct. Um, and prior to that, the last body that was found was of a German soldier that was fighting in the British Army. And that was found when they were building the new museum there. So the museum is actually underground. Um, so that was found. So, but there's never been any mass graves being excavated. There is a painting outside of the south gate of Ugamon that potentially shows funeral pyres. But again, no archaeological evidence has suggested that has found the location of that. But I think probably funeral pyres were probably the way that most of the bodies were disposed of.
Mhm.
To be honest, sort of we're a long way from the silent cities that you're going to get in the First World War, for example, with
It,
proper
it,
recognised
this must
burials,
be
etc.
awful for the families at home that have obviously lost people during this battle, not ever knowing what happened to their body. I mean, it must have been awful.
Yeah, I think we're looking at a time where things were different.
Hmm.
I think that it's almost like that once someone left home, the chances of seeing them ever again were, or hearing from them ever again, were pretty slim.
Hmm.
It's not like say today where it's 200 years on where everyone's got mobile phones, everyone's got social media, so you can leave and be completely opposite side of the world and still have contact with people quite easily. But at the same time, even if you go back 100 years to the First World War, you had letters, you had things like that. That even that was sort of very minuscule. You didn't have a fully functioning post office, so you wouldn't have been writing letters, things like that. So I just think that sort of the times were different. It would have been like, yeah, you wouldn't have heard anything, but I think that you kind of just go, well, you knew they were in the army, you knew they were in Belgium, they were probably going to be there, and you're not heard from them in a couple of months. Work it out yourself.
So was there any like way of, you know, identifying the people that had actually died? Obviously not, but
No, from body wise, no, like it's obviously well pre dog tag or anything like that.
mm,
Um, there would be army lists. So the regimental sergeant major or the colour sergeant, which is the precursor to a modern company sergeant major, um, would have done a roll call and swipes off the names.
and so that's how they would have gauged, you know, if somebody had technically died.
Yeah, because obviously what you would get is that you'd have the morning after roll call,
Hmm.
and then gradually men would filter back, because you would have walking wounded who have got minor injuries that have been in an A post and patched up, and they're coming back fairly quickly. Then you've got people that are more seriously wounded but would have been located because they're in the aid stations, they've had an amputation, they've got to then start working out shipping them home, things like that. So they'd find out identities that way as well. So gradually, those names that were not present on the morning after the battle will start to come back in. Maybe not, wouldn't come back into the line, but they're on the army list. You'll start cross-referencing.
Hmm.
So you can
Building up
cross-reference.
a picture of who's there and who's not.
Yeah, you can cross-reference from the roll call from the morning after to a week after, and you can say, okay, but well, this person's reappeared, this person's reappeared. So
Yeah, I get you.
we're guessing that they were
Hmm.
slightly wounded or they that they were missing for some reason. And then if you cross-reference this to this army list in the hospital, then this name and regiment appears. So that, yeah, let's say that's that person. And so you start to build up a number, but that's why when you ask for sort of casualty rates and things like that for this period, it's a lot harder to ascertain. It's
Yeah,
certainly like it's doable, and
yeah.
there are references
So
that
so
have the number.
what are the statistics, supposed statistics of the casualty uh, amounts at Waterloo?
In terms of the British Army, it's the highest prior to the First World War.
Hmm. So it's a lot of people.
A lot of people, and it's a significant chunk of the population.
Right. Okay. Just this
Um,
one battle.
just this one battle because it.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously, when you add into it all the other the Peninsula battles as well, but the army's taken an absolute battering. Um, and
And again, is that down to the style of Napoleonic fighting, like you said, where they're getting so close to each other and
yeah,
shooting lead into each other? Yeah, it's awful, isn't
yeah,
it? Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, okay, mate. Anyway, so let's talk about the end of the campaign and what happens after the battle, because there's a fair bit that goes on, isn't there?
yeah. So we've already discussed the meeting of Wellington and Blucher outside the Belle Alliance, and what is agreed is that the Prussians will take up the chase of the shattered French army and pursue them. The British Allied army is just too decimated to do it. It suffered too horrifically. So the Prussians follow the French. They fight one more engagement outside of Paris, which the French actually win and hold the Prussians off. But again, similar to 1814, Napoleon is advised that he he's done. There's no that like if he continues to claim to be emperor and stay in Paris, then the Prussians are just going to wait outside, wait until the British army's patched itself up, the Russians and the Austrians have arrived, and then they'll storm Paris, and it'll be an absolute bloodbath. So he's convinced he's advised, and again takes up the advice to abdicate. He then flees Paris and eventually, so he abdicates on the 21st of June, so only 3 days later. And then on the 15th of July, he surrenders to the Royal Navy on HMS Bellerophon, which is a picture there. On the 15th of July, he sailed from France. I think it's Brest he surrenders to, I believe, off the top of my head. But he sailed into British waters whilst discussions are decreed as to what is to happen to him. And then after it's then decided that he will be sent into exile, except this time the exile will be on the island of St. Helena, which is in the South Atlantic. He's transported to there, where he, he lives out his life until he succumbs to some stomach cancer in 1821. He's initially buried there, on St. Helena, but some point in in the later 1800s, his body is repatriated to France and is buried in the Les Invalides Hospital, which is their version of Chelsea, um, in Paris, and that's where he rests today.
Hmm. And I'll put you on a spot here a little bit, but what would you say his legacy is?
Napoleon's legacy is an awkward one because depending upon where in Europe you see him, I believe different people have got different takes on him. I think for the French, he brought in the Code Napoleon is the basis for their modern law and society. The departments of France is something Napoleon brought brought in. So he, in terms of modern France, he's very important. If you go to Waterloo, you would and you didn't know who won the battle, you would think he won it. Um, Obviously, from a British point of view, um, we see him as someone who tried to conquer all of Europe and was a warmonger and a despot
Yeah, and maybe a dictator.
and and a dictator. I think various other European nations have conflicting views on him as well. It is a conflicted character in
but,
terms of
but
his legacy.
yeah, and but as far as historical figures are concerned, there's not many bigger than him, is there? If you know what I'm trying to say.
No, it is a very important historical figure. If you look at that period of time as well, other than Wellington, he stands head and shoulders above everyone.
Yes.
And it's not to, I believe that Wellington, if you look at his career, is up at that same level because he bested him.
Hmm.
I think if he didn't win the head-to-head fight, then Wellington's legacy is far less.
Yeah.
But because he won the head-to-head against the greatest general of his time, he is automatically in that same conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's similar to, say, Cornwallis and Washington.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
if Cornwallis had beaten Washington, then would Washington be as famous as he is?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's move the discussion on and let's talk about recent movie. I know you have some views about this. Now, I have a sort of a Hollywood is Hollywood, and you know, you just got to let it be, I suppose, because if they didn't make things entertaining, then you probably wouldn't go and watch them. But I know a lot of historians have obviously bashed the new movie. But what is your take on the recent film Napoleon, and what did you think of the Waterloo scene?
It was utter tripe. I'm not going to say anything more than that. I thought that it wasn't entertaining at all. It was boring. There was parts I was nodding off. And the Waterloo scene, my God, like did Ridley Scott just Google famous French battles and then click on Verdun? Because they were in trenches. The British positions looked like Yorktown, which is the only thing I can think of. Again, that it's made for an American audience, and it's what do they think of when they think of redcoats? They think of Yorktown. So it was redoubts and fortifications. And then when the Prussians turn up, they come in from the wrong side.
Oh dear.
They come in from the right, not the left.
Okay, right. So
So
yeah, okay,
uh,
get where you're coming from. Okay,
when it comes on Apple TV, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and watch it again because that's about 6 hours long, I believe. Because
okay. So there's more to it.
it's a mini series, so
Yeah,
I think that there'll be bits of it whereby the editing may have cut it, and that's why things have gone wrong. Like how you can have a biopic of Napoleon and not have the Battle of Marengo, which is what he named his horse after, and
yeah,
then the Austerlitz scenes where they fired on the pond. Well, approximately 6 soldiers fell in it in real life. It wasn't like Lake Windermere frozen over and they advanced across it. They knew that Like a lake like that, soldiers know it's there. They're
Yeah,
not
I
going to
mean,
advance.
I get you, but again, it's that I think it's a little bit of artistic license taken way too far. But one movie that was really good and is still good today, and I still enjoy it, and I know you will agree, is the 1970s movie Waterloo. Very good movie.
Very, very good. Um, in multiple reasons. First of all, you've got the most extras ever. I think it's the most extras that's ever been in a film. So it's not CGI footage. Every soldier you see
Yeah, some good scenes in that, isn't there? Good battle
is
scenes. Yeah.
real deal. The chronology of the battle is perfect. Everything is happening in the right order, the right locations. Yes, it's a 50-year-old movie, so we have to realize that there are bits of it that look a bit naff by modern standards. You know, it's the same cannon that keeps getting blown up every time,
Hmm.
or it's when you've got them riding on horses and they sat them in front of a projection screen projecting the scene and then put them on the old horses that you used to get outside the supermarket.
Hmm.
Put that you put 10 pence in and you had a little ride on. But it, it's a film that's over 50 years old now. But also what I'd say is as well, which is far better than the latest film, is the casting was bang on as well.
Mhm.
You know, um, Plummer as Wellington is the best portrayal of Wellington there's been. Uh, Steiger does a good Napoleon as well. Like obviously these are historical figures. We don't know what they were like in real life, but when you think of certain historical characters, you often base them upon a certain portrayal of that character. And for me, Plummer is Wellington. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
very, very, very good film.
And then obviously you've got the Sharp series, which is fantastic. And well, it wasn't the last one because they did make more, but one of the last ones that was supposed to be the last one was Sharp's Waterloo, and that was fantastic. But that focused more on the obviously the Sharp's rifles, didn't it? But what did you
Yeah,
think of that TV series of the 90s?
Sharp was what got me into Napoleonics.
Okay, cool. That's excellent.
You know, as a young teenager growing up, that was a major insight into me getting interested in that period.
Hmm. Which
Uh,
is fantastic, and that's what you want, isn't it? You know, the same as me with
yeah,
Gettysburg. You know, you want that draw in there. But I know you recently visited the battlefield, and it's something that I need to do myself. Um, so we're just going to talk a little bit about, you know, if you did end up going to the battlefield, um, you know, how accessible is it? Is it well signed? Is it easy to get round? Things like that.
it's very, very accessible. Um, it's 10 miles outside of Brussels, so if you've got if you're driving, it's easy. If you haven't got a car, when I went with my father in 2015 to watch the 200th reenactment, we went by train. So Eurostar from London to Brussels is 3 hours, and then it's about a half-hour train ride to Brennelud station, and then about a 20-minute walk from there to the battlefield. Very, very well signposted. If you go to the village of Waterloo itself, there's a lot of hotels and there's plenty of places to stay and to eat. So, um, very well, very, very well, accommodated for. Um, you do have a number of sites to visit on the battlefield. Now, unfortunately, or depending upon your view, the Lion Mound Monument, if you go back one, Davin, um, the um, the monument on the left there, and from on this picture, the picture on the right, the that's the view from the mound. So it does give you a fantastic view. Unfortunately, it they basically just bulldozed from either side of the ridge, shunted it up, and so and it's on the location supposedly that the Prince of Orange was wounded, but when the Duke of Wellington went there for the unveiling, he actually muttered, "My God, what have they done to my battlefield?" in terms of, but there are a number of monuments there. You've got the Wounded Eagle Monument there, which is the site that the Imperial Guard stepped off from. I think that's a fantastic memorial. Um, my only criticism, I believe that it's a bit of a lost cause of site for Napoleon. Um, there's a lot of statues of him, and there's none of Wellington or Bluecoat at all, including a statue that's well behind the ridgeline. So an area that French troops never even penetrated to has got a statue of Napoleon. But got a good little good museum there. It's underground. Then you go up and you go into the panorama and then climb the mound. From there, you can either get a shuttle or walk down to the Huguenot farmhouse. You do need to go to the museum first because on your ticket, it'll give you the key code to get into the farmhouse. So there's no entrance, there's no ticket office down at Huguenot. So don't do the mistake I did of walk down to Huguenot and then realize you had to come all the way back up to get a ticket.
Hmm.
Um, but the there's plenty of pathways. I had a book by Charles Esdale, Walking Waterloo. So my latest thing, if you follow my channel, you'd have seen some of the First World War stuff I've been doing. But my thing recently has been to actually walk battlefields. I think it's a far better way of engaging with the battlefield. You start to see undulations in the ground. You start to see ridge lines and higher ground and things like that, because not every higher ground is, we talk about higher ground like um if you've seen the film Get, like Dan said about the film Gettysburg, that whole first day is talking about, oh, what's good, is it good ground, is it good ground? Well, what constitutes good ground? And you get that chance, when you get that chance to be able to walk these battlefields, to stand on these locations, you can see these little dips, you can see these dead grounds, and then suddenly these books that you read on on various battles start making a lot more sense. Because when you look at it on a 3D map, or if you've got your illustration from, say, your Osprey book or something, or a book of that nature, sometimes you don't, these undulations in the ground are so minute that they don't warrant that in a picture. But when you look at it and you think, right, well, that's why they didn't see the cavalry, because it's 2 foot lower, and that's enough to hide them, for example. Or so when you're, like I say, when I was up at the Bell Alliance position to the right, looking as if heading round the Erlon's position, the embankment that the road runs along completely blocks any visibility of that western part of the battlefield over towards Ugham and places like that. So it's when you walk a battlefield, you can engage in it a lot more, and also you can start to feel ground conditions. So when I was over there a couple of weeks ago, it had been relatively wet, so it gives you an idea of, actually, this is what the ground's like when they fought it. It's cloggy. You're getting a lot of it stuck on your boots. That's something else to bear in mind. So walking battlefields for me, it's something I've only done sort of fairly recently. So I took a trip, like going back to my First World War interest. I took a trip out to the battlefields last April, and then since then I've been back to both of the Somme and to Ypres, and both of those times I bought myself a walking guide. So when I was planning on going to Waterloo, the first thing I looked up was, is there a book out there that's doing the same thing? Because it just gives you a completely different engagement in the battle. You can connect with it a lot more. So when you start reading more accounts of it, and you start hearing about dead ground and high ground and things like that, in your head you can visualize it a lot more. It's a lot more easier to understand.
Yeah, and of course, another way of engaging with the battlefield is actually doing the reenactment there, isn't it? So I know you've done that a few times, and you said you went and see the 200. So just quickly tell us a little bit of what that experience is like, to be able to actually go to that ground and actually be there in the uniform and smell the gunpowder and take part in them.
Yeah, so I'm lucky in a way. I've been to 2 reenactments now. The pictures you see on the screen, these are ones that I took at 200. So I went as a punter for 200. I'd been in the hobby during American Civil War um, quite a time before, early 2000s. I was a reenactor. Then went to uni, fell out the hobby, saw it was on, so decided I was going to go over and have a look. And we watched the first day of battle. We walked around the second day. I bumped into the guys from the 44th, and they recruited me in the grounds of Ugamon. Um, but and then in 2020, we was supposed to go back and do the 205th. That obviously was cancelled, so it got rolled on until 2022, which was when we did the 205 plus two. So I've done a reasonable sized reenactment as well as watching the big reenactment at 200. And there is something special about one or two things. First of all, when we're in reenactment in the UK, it's normally quite small. So when you get to be on the field with thousands of reenactors and you've got lag, bang, guns going off everywhere, etc., it's quite impressive. And then to actually have that experience of being on the battlefield as well just makes it sort of almost goosebumpy. Um, to actually fire there. And I've also had the experience. I thought I did the only ever reenactment at Quatre Bras as well. So that was for me that was really special because that was the first time muskets have been fired on that battlefield since the actual battle itself.
Wow. Yeah.
So that
And
was
so do these reenactments attract a lot of people come in and watch this?
yeah. So Waterloo really go big on tourism. I have to admit they really do go big on tourism. So the big reenactments happen every 5 years.
Yeah.
And normally every year on the anniversary weekend, there'll be a small reenactment in and around the Ugamon building because that's now a museum. So normally what they'll have is they'll have the British camps inside it, the French camps around it, and then the French will try and take what they'll do a French assault on it. There's a few places around if you go inside that I've been lucky enough to actually go up on there's some scaffolding built up so you can get up onto it and look over and I've fired from it so normally they just have sort of areas there that they'll have men British soldiers or British and Dutch soldiers inside up on these positions and the French will come and they're just firing over their heads but then every 5 years they have the big one so next year he's 210 so that's going to be a big one.
Okay, awesome. Okay, let's move on to books because I know if you was to actually write a book, what would you focus on the Battle of Waterloo itself before we get on to the recommendations?
So if I was writing one, I'd focus on your county regiments because these were the bread and butter regiments, the rank and file of the British Army, and yet a lot of books that are written are about focus. They'll either focus on the battle as a whole, which is fine, or they'll go to the niche regiments, the guards, the rifles. Um, and so your county regiments, the bulk of your army, often get forgotten. Um, so obviously we've been linked to the 44th is that would probably be the one that I'd look mainly for. But I think in terms of that kind of the generic regiment, that's what I'd write on because again, a bit like reenacting, these regiments sort of fall by the wayside because everyone wants to do something special. So you've you've got a lot in green. You've got more in green than there should be in terms of the amount of red. Um, Everyone like regiments want to be grenadiers. They want to be light company. It's sort of like just a plain center company. For in every regiment you had 10 companies. You had one grenadier company, one light company, and then 8 center companies. So center company should be like the bread and butter of the reenacting community, and yet it's one of the smallest.
Mhm.
So that a generic county regiment, county regiment would definitely be where I'd be looking at, to be honest.
Okay, awesome. And I have got 4 book recommendations up here, which obviously you've read. So are these what you're recommending people if they want to learn more about the Battle of Waterloo?
Yeah, like to be honest, Battle of Waterloo is probably the battle that's had the most written about it.
Yeah, so
Um,
there's a
the,
lot to choose from. Yeah,
yeah, like even when I was just picking out from my catalogue here, I was just like, oh my God, where do I start?
yeah.
Um, so there's some books on there either because I haven't got them or I wasn't sure. Obviously, my go-to if you've never read a book about a battle before, my first point of call would be go get yourself an Osprey because they might not be the most detailed, but they give you good maps, they give you good diagrams, so you can get a very basic understanding of a battle before you start delving into the finer points. Then the 4 that I've got there are pretty good next levels. You've got some kind of insight into the battle itself, the types of tactics, who was going to be in that, who's involved, etc. They're that good next level of book. It's kind of like what I would call like your dad history books in terms of the thing you buy your dad for a birthday or Christmas present. History books, but they're good. They'll give you that slightly higher level introduction than maybe like an Osprey would. And then from there, you've got your more niche stuff, so sort of the books that like you get published by, say, Pen and Sword, someone like that, where you're looking specific biography of a specific officer. You might have so for example, what have I got up there on my shelf at the minute? I've got Gareth Glover's Waterloo Archives. And these are just extracts of various people's letters, diaries, etc. Um, I've got another one there, Waterloo Witnesses, and it's got each day, and then it's just got numerous diary extracts, things like that. So if you're really into source material, deep dive in history, you know, your main interested in Waterloo is about the light cavalry counter charge to rescue the heavy brigade. That's gonna you're gonna find something in one of those books about it, where maybe it's sort of briefly skipped out mentioned in some of these more wider books. So yeah, it's finding out what level of history you wish to look at, um, what level of understanding you've got of the battle at the minute. If you pick up one of these Waterloo archives and it's the first book that you've read on Waterloo, you're going to be struggling because the it's too high a level. Where these ones, I find they fit that level of as somebody who's an enthusiast and historian in the subject. It's got a nice. You're always finding points from it. But if you're someone who's just getting into the period, they've also got like they're an accessible history as well before moving on to the sort of the real serious sort of books that you need to have that real knowledge before you even start reading.
Okay, excellent, mate. Thank you.
And obviously, if
And
you are new to it, watch the film, the
yes,
1971, because
yes, do it. Yeah, watch that first. Definitely, that's a good point.
again that will allow you that's a good entry point to allow you to sort of get a real quick within a couple of hours you'll get a quick understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, excellent point there, Mark. Thanks for that. And all that's left to say, ladies and gentlemen, is thank you very much, Mark. I hope you enjoyed this second episode of the Waterloo campaign, the Battle of Waterloo. And yeah, so thanks, Mark.
Yeah, cheers, Dan. Thanks, everyone. See you later. Bye bye.
All that's left to say is cheers. See you soon.